On their wedding anniversary, Grace arrived at her parents' house after a long, stormy drive. Rain still clung to her coat as she stepped onto the porch. She hadn't been home in months. The last time her mother barely looked her in the eye. This time felt no different. The porch light flickered overhead like it wasn't sure it was welcome either. Her sister Amanda had already arrived in her spotless white SUV. Of course she flew in, Grace muttered to herself. Probably didn't even see the storm. She reached into the back seat and pulled out two things, her overnight bag and a carefully wrapped photo album. Inside were pictures of their childhood, birthdays, beach days, even a few of their late grandpa. Grace had spent weeks putting it together. It was meant to be a family gift. Something thoughtful. Something that mattered. Where are you watching from today? Kindly hit like, comment and subscribe to this channel for more. She knocked twice and pushed the front door open. Grace, her mother called from the kitchen with a too bright voice. You made it. Amanda turned from the kitchen island, already mid-laugh at something their father had said. She gave Grace a small wave. You look tired. Long drive, Grace replied, forcing a smile as she dropped her bag by the stairs. Hi, Dad. He didn't stand. You should have come last night. We had cocktails. Got caught in traffic. Delaware was a mess, she said, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. Amanda stepped off the bar stool and gave her a polite hug. Not tight. Not warm. Just contact. Her fiancé, Tyler, extended a firm handshake like he didn't remember if they'd met before. Grace spotted it right away, the gold ribbon box sitting proudly on the kitchen island. It looked expensive. Boutique wrapping. Elegant paper. A soft bow tied with care. Amanda kept glancing at it like she already knew what was inside. You didn't have to bring anything, their mother said, her gaze landing on the modest gift Grace held. But, thanks. She took the photo album and casually placed it beside the paper towel roll like it was a coupon. Grace bit the inside of her cheek and said nothing. They sat for dinner around 6. Amanda had changed into a floral dress, hair curled just right. Grace stayed in her jeans and sweater. Their mother made pot roast, Amanda's favorite. Grace wasn't surprised. Their father poured red wine for everyone except Grace. He handed her a glass of sparkling water with a smirk. Still on that health kick? Sure, Grace said. Dinner talk was smooth. Everyone laughed at Tyler's stories about working at the firm. Their mother kept brushing invisible crumbs from Amanda's sleeve. Grace sat quietly, sipping her drink, smiling when expected. He felt like a guest. Like someone invited out of guilt or obligation. Amanda leaned close to Tyler. I hope you like the kitchen. I already have plans to open it up. Maybe knock out that wall near the den. Grace's fingers curled under the table. After dessert, their father stood up and cleared his throat. Amanda, he said with a proud smile, your mother and I have something for you. Amanda gasped as he handed her the gold ribbon box. She untied it quickly like someone used to being celebrated. Inside was a smaller white box. A key sat inside, shining under the light. A key, she laughed. To what? Our house, he said. The one on Maple Grove. Amanda's hand flew to her chest. The house we grew up in? He nodded. It's yours now. You've earned it. You've always been the responsible one. Their mother looked ready to cry. Tyler patted Amanda's back. Grace didn't clap. She didn't smile. And for you, Grace, their mother said, turning to her. She handed her a plain white envelope. No ribbon. No decoration. Just her name printed faintly on the front. Inside, Grace found a printed job ad. Administrative assistant. Entry level. $38,000. Location, Harrisburg. Her father chuckled. We thought this suits you better. Something manageable. Closer to your pace. Grace looked at the paper, then back at the smiling faces across from her. Amanda was already discussing kitchen remodels. Grace could barely swallow. She excused herself quietly and walked toward the bathroom. The hallway lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the floor. As she passed the laundry room, she noticed 3 boxes stacked neatly. Thick black marker scrawled across them. Grace's room. Books. Grace's closet. They had already packed up her childhood. Inside the bathroom, she locked the door and leaned against the sink, staring at herself in the mirror. Her face looked tired. She looked like someone fading from her own story. She pulled out her phone. No real reason. Just instinct. There was an email from her bank. Subject: mortgage transfer confirmation. The house had changed ownership. She was listed as co-signer. Except, she hadn't signed anything. She opened the attachment. The signature was hers. Perfect. Precise. But not hers. Her father had forged it. She stared at the screen until her fingers went numb. Grace splashed cold water on her face. Dried it with a hand towel. She walked back into the kitchen. Everyone was laughing about something. She didn't ask what. She picked up her bag and said, "I have an early meeting tomorrow." No one protested. As she reached the front door, her mother said just loud enough, "She should be grateful anyone still thinks of her." Grace paused. Outside, the rain had turned into a light mist. The sky was a dull blue, the kind that makes streetlights glow even before sunset. She looked down. A piece of gold ribbon from Amanda's gift had fallen onto the porch. Damp. Curled at the edges. He picked it up. Not because it was pretty. Not because she needed it. Because it reminded her what they valued, and what they thought she was worth. She slid it into her coat pocket. Then she smiled, not from joy but from clarity. And she left. Grace's apartment was dark when she stepped inside. Not a cozy kind of dark. More like forgotten. The hallway bulb flickered as she tossed her coat onto a chair and dropped her bag beside it. The printed job ad sat untouched on her coffee table, crisp and unbothered like it hadn't just ruined her night. She stared at it for a moment, then walked into the kitchenette and pressed the coffee maker's button. Steam hissed into the silence. She leaned on the counter and whispered, "Manageable." Her voice cracked slightly. It wasn't just the job. It was the message underneath. "You don't belong here anymore." She sat on the couch with her knees pulled up, holding the mug in both hands. The heat didn't soothe her the way it used to. Her mind replayed every word from dinner. Every look. Every laugh she didn't get to join in. And that moment her father said, "Closer to your pace." Her grip tightened around the cup. Across the room, a pile of unopened mail leaned against the wall. Grace stood, walked over and picked up one envelope. Her handwriting stood out, sharp and confident. She thought again about the mortgage email. That forged signature. It had been too neat, too careful. She opened her journal and flipped to a blank page. Her pen hovered before she began to write. Age 10 missed my science fair. Amanda had ballet. Age 14 mom said the blue dress made Amanda look pale. Age 18 they skipped my birthday. Amanda had SAT prep. Age 22 graduation photo never framed. She paused. The memories hit harder now that they were in ink. Grace closed the journal and stared at the ceiling. Amanda's kindergarten recital photo still hung in the hallway. But Grace's college graduation? Forgotten. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was a pattern. And patterns could be broken. Her phone buzzed. A message from Amanda. Photo, new kitchen in progress. Caption, still surreal. Can't wait for you to see it done. No apology. No mention of the dinner. Just marble countertops and fake cheer. Grace started to type back. Enjoy it. You always get what you want. But her thumb hovered. Then she slowly erased every word. Instead, she opened an old folder labeled Estate Transfer, Grandpa's Property. She had created it years ago when their grandfather passed. There, her name was listed right next to Amanda's on the original deed transfer. Grace remembered that day, how Amanda twirled her pen while Grace had read every page twice. She clicked through each file until she reached the one labeled Initial Co-Signers. Her heart dropped. Her name had been removed months ago. What happened wasn't an accident. It was planned. Piece by piece. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background as Grace printed out the forged mortgage form. She circled the fake signature in bright red ink and taped it to the wall beside her door. Next to it she placed the gold ribbon. Above both she scribbled one line. Know where you were erased and start there. She stood back and read it again. Her voice stayed steady as she whispered it aloud. This time there would be no pretending. She grabbed her notepad, slid the mortgage printout into her bag and stepped out into the morning chill. Her hair was pulled back, shoes laced not for comfort but for war. The Allegheny County Recorder's office sat in a narrow plaza downtown, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. Grace pushed open the glass door. The room smelled like paper and dust. A woman behind the plexiglass window looked up. Her name tag said Marta. Hi, Grace said, keeping her voice calm. I'm looking for property records. Something might have been transferred without my permission. Marta barely blinked. Address. Grace gave it. Marta typed. ID. Grace slid her driver's license across the counter. Her hands didn't shake. Marta printed a few pages and clipped them together. She passed them through the slot. Here you go. Grace sat down on a nearby bench and flipped through the pages. The first document was the original deed, signed by her, Amanda, and their grandfather after he passed. It was real. Clean. Legitimate. The second page made her stomach turn. A newer title transfer. Dated 3 months ago. Buyer, Amanda Evans. Seller, Ronald Evans. Price, $1. Grace's name was gone. But at the bottom of the last page was a shaky signature pretending to be hers. Not close, but legal looking enough for someone not to question it. In the contact field, an email, ron.evans63a@. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. Her father hadn't even bothered to hide his tracks. Can I get a certified copy? She asked Marta. That'll be $6, Marta replied. Grace handed over the cash with steady fingers. Outside, the mid-morning wind was cold, but she didn't shiver. She gripped the documents and walked away. Her grandfather once said, "That kitchen's got your name on it." But now it was someone else's Instagram background. And she was done being erased. When Grace got home, the rain had turned to a soft drizzle. She shook off her coat, then laid the certified deed copy beside the job listing on her kitchen table. The contrast hit her hard. One paper gave away her home. The other tried to reduce her worth. She stared at both. Her name, the real one and the forged one, stood inches apart. She drew a bold red line between them. One truth, two lies. And then, without realizing it, she smiled. Not a happy smile. A knowing one. The kind that grows when you've seen enough. She crossed to her small hallway closet and pulled out a dusty gray file box. Inside were documents she'd helped her grandfather organize before he got sick. Bank letters, tax forms, trust records. She carried it to the kitchen table. No rush. Just quiet precision. Grace scanned each document into a digital folder on her laptop. She labeled it, "They forgot I can read contracts." By the time she finished, the sun had set. Her back hurt. Her eyes burned. But her hands didn't tremble. At the bottom of the file box, beneath years of legal files, she found a thin envelope. Her name and Amanda's were written on the front in her grandfather's handwriting. Transfer terms, notarized copy. She didn't open it. Not yet. Some things needed the right moment. She taped the newly certified forged deed to the wall beside the kitchen. Right beside it, she placed a sticky note. Build your timeline, not to fight yet, but to understand the theft. She stood there looking at it for a long time. Her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemail, just that little red dot blinking on the screen. Curious, she pressed play. A woman's voice crackled through. Urgent. He said you'd never find out. Check the second drawer in your father's study before it's too late. End of message. Grace stood still, phone in hand, heart racing. The voice wasn't familiar. Not family. Not a neighbor. But the way she spoke, it sounded personal. Like it hurt her to say it. She replayed the message again. And again. Second drawer. Her father's study. A place she hadn't entered in years. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she used to do homework while Amanda got all the attention for ballet trophies and perfect curls. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her old contacts. Then she called Janine, her old babysitter. The phone rang twice. Janine? It's Grace. Grace. Janine's voice warmed with surprise. Goodness, it's been a while. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest. I'll try. Grace's voice dropped. Do you remember ever seeing my dad forge something? My name, maybe. There was a long pause. Then Janine exhaled. One time, she said softly. He was at that desk, your grandfather's desk. Muttering to himself. Said, she'll thank me later. She always does. What was he holding? An envelope. It had your name on it. Grace's stomach twisted. That night, Grace didn't sleep. She waited. Watching her mother's social media like a hawk. Sure enough, around 7:42 p.m., Her mom posted a photo of steak tartare and creme brulee. Dinner out. Perfect timing. She grabbed her coat and a flashlight. Outside her parents' house, she knelt beside the old planter box. The same one she used to hide keys behind back in high school. It was still there. Rusted, but it turned. The door creaked slightly as she stepped inside. The scent of lemon cleaner and wood polish clung to every corner. Familiar. Too familiar. She moved quickly, quietly, down the hall to her father's study. The door was slightly ajar. The brass-handled desk still gleamed beneath the dim hallway light. Grace opened the second drawer. Files. Tax returns. Discretionary folders. Then beneath it all an envelope marked. Trust reassignment. Grace to Amanda. She stared at it, the ink almost daring her to blink. Filed. Notarized. Months before the dinner. It wasn't a decision. It was a plan. She held the envelope like it might burn through her fingers. This wasn't about Amanda being the favorite. This was a full replacement. They didn't want her on the outside. They wanted her erased. Then she noticed another paper tucked behind the envelope. Not typed. Handwritten. Her grandfather's handwriting. If you're reading this, they buried what's yours. Follow the coordinates. Below the line, a string of numbers. Longitude and latitude. Grace felt the air shift in the room. Like time had paused. She took both the envelope and the note, folded them into her coat and carefully closed the drawer again. Nothing else in the room moved. Nothing had to. The truth was enough. She slipped the planter back into place and walked down the driveway, her steps slow but certain. The wind had picked up, but she didn't feel cold. For the first time in weeks she felt awake. Grace spent the next morning tracing the coordinates on her laptop. They led to a place she hadn't been since childhood. A cabin in the woods north of town. Her grandfather's retreat. His thinking place, he used to call it. She remembered it now. The smell of old wood, the quiet lake nearby, the way he'd squeeze her hand before they crossed the porch. She packed a small bag, just the essentials. Then she booked a rental car and began the drive. The road twisted through hills and trees. Cell service dropped halfway through. As she turned onto the gravel path, the memories came rushing in. She parked, stepped out and walked toward the cabin. It looked older, weather-worn. But still standing. She reached under the loose plank where he used to hide the key. It was still there. Inside, the air was heavy with stillness. Sunlight slipped through the boards, dust swirling in golden beams. Grace's footsteps were soft on the wooden floor. Nothing had changed. A chipped coffee mug still sat in the sink. A folded quilt draped over the old couch. She moved toward the fireplace. Something about that spot tugged at her memory. With the edge of a poker, she pried up one of the floorboards. There was a black folder, bound with an old wax seal. Beside it, a cassette recorder. Her fingers hovered, then pressed play. His voice came through, low, worn, familiar. Grace, if you're hearing this, it means the worst has happened. Her grandfather's voice continued, crackling softly. They erased you to give Amanda everything. I didn't agree. I left you something only you can claim. It's not just about the house. It's about what they took from you starting when you were a child. Grace stood frozen. There's a trust. I created it for you. But your father made sure the clause was buried. You have until your 34th birthday to claim it in person. If you're hearing this, you have 23 days left. Then the tape clicked off. Silence. No more instructions. Just urgency. Grace stared at her hands. 23 days. That trust? The one she'd been written out of? It was never meant for Amanda. It was hers. All along. She opened the folder next. Inside, a notarized letter from her grandfather's legal advisor. Confirmed the trust existed. Her name was listed clearly, sole heir. Beneath it were yellowed letters between her grandfather and his estate lawyer. One line stood out in a note scribbled between pages. The lawyer moved to Arizona. If she wants to fight, she'll need him. Grace tucked the folder into her bag. Her next step was clear. They thought she'd be too late. Too passive. Too broken. But now she had something stronger than rage. She had direction. She glanced around the cabin one last time. Her eyes landed on a photo frame turned backward on the bookshelf. She flipped it. It was her. 8 years old, mud on her knees, grinning beside her grandfather by the lake. She whispered, "I'm still here, Grandpa." Then she locked the door behind her. As she walked back to the car, the trees bent in the wind, but she didn't feel small. She felt solid. Her name had been buried but not lost. Grace boarded a flight to Arizona with nothing but her small carry-on and the folder clutched tightly to her chest. She didn't sleep the night before. Her mind spun with her grandfather's voice, the words, "Only you can claim this." By the time the plane landed in Sedona, the sun had spread itself across the red cliffs like firelight. Grace picked up her rental car, a beige sedan that smelled faintly of lemon and dust, and drove straight to the motel she had booked. A plain two-story place with no frills, just a space to think. The law office listed in the file wasn't far. It sat between a florist and a small hardware store. The building was old, the sign above the door faded. Raymond G. Eldridge Esq. The bell jingled as she stepped inside. Behind the desk sat an older man with tired eyes. He looked up slowly, then stood. "Grace," he said, like her name had been waiting in the room all along. "You look just like your grandfather when he was ready for a fight." He motioned for her to sit and pulled open a drawer, retrieving a sealed envelope. Her grandfather's handwriting covered the front. "Only if she comes." Raymond handed it over like it was something sacred. "He left that with me the same year Amanda started showing up at the office with your mom. Said he had a bad feeling." Grace opened it carefully. Inside was an official amendment, signed, notarized, dated. It clearly named her as the sole heir, not just to the family home but to another property in Aspen, a place she'd never even heard of. She blinked. "He bought something in my name?" Raymond nodded. "Years ago. Under a guardianship clause. It only activates if you're proven to be defrauded or estranged by your immediate family." Grace leaned back in the chair, her hands shaking now. "There's a case then?" Raymond's voice was steady. "Absolutely. But we'll need evidence. A handwriting expert. A witness. Audio if possible." She nodded slowly. "I have all of that." They walked to a nearby diner. Vinyl booths, strong coffee, and a waitress who smiled without asking questions. Raymond stirred his drink. "Why now, Grace? Why fight back after all these years?" Grace's fingers traced the edge of her mug. "As I believed them for too long. That I was dramatic. That I was imagining things. But I wasn't." She looked up. "This isn't just about a house. It's about telling the younger version of me that she wasn't crazy." Raymond nodded, his eyes soft. "You were always the quiet one. But you saw everything. You listened. Now it's their turn." He slid a fresh document across the table. "If you're ready, we start this week." Grace took it with both hands. "I'm ready." A few days later, she returned home to a new message waiting on her phone. "Dinner to celebrate Amanda's move-in. You're welcome to join." There was no apology. No warmth. Just an invite like bait. Grace stood in her small apartment and stared at the message. Then without replying, she got dressed. No jewelry. No makeup. Just clean black pants, a cardigan, and silence. Their house looked exactly the same. Porch light flickering. Cracks near the driveway. Amanda's car parked front and center. When her mother opened the door, she smiled too wide. "You look stable for once." Grace nodded. "Thanks." Inside, the table was set with dried lavender and cloth napkins. Amanda sat tall, flipping her hair, wearing a pastel blouse Grace vaguely remembered losing in college. "Look," Amanda said, holding up the house key. "It's official." Grace sat, reached for her glass of water and waited. Halfway through dinner, she set her fork down. "Just curious," she said calmly. "Did you update the deed yet?" Amanda didn't hesitate. "Of course. It's in my name now. Officially." Her father chuckled. "Had to sign a couple things for you. Nothing serious." Grace tilted her head. "Left hand or right?" His smile faded slightly. "What?" "The signature. The analyst noticed it doesn't match any of my documents." The room went quiet. Amanda's fork hit her plate with a clink. Her mother cleared her throat. "Let's not get dramatic." Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "This is a cease and desist letter. It covers the forgery. And the trust." No one spoke. Amanda scoffed. "That won't hold up." Grace gently tapped her phone. "This conversation is being recorded. Including when Dad admitted he signed for me." Her father paled. Amanda's lips trembled. "I'm not here to scream," Grace said. just to end the performance. She stood and left the folder on the table. No one followed her. She didn't slam the door. She didn't need to. The sound of her footsteps said everything. 3 weeks passed. No calls. No invitations. Just quiet. The civil hearing was held in courtroom 4B. Grace sat beside her attorney, Miss Hartman, calm and focused. Across the room, her parents and Amanda looked smaller than she remembered. The judge called the case. Grace Evans versus Ronald Evans, Beverly Evans and Amanda Evans. Hartman stood. Your Honor, the signature was forged. Here's the forensic report. The judge studied it. His brow didn't move. But his silence said plenty. Next came Janine's testimony. She stood nervously in her cardigan, hands shaking. But her voice held. I heard Mr. Evans say, don't worry. She doesn't need to be involved. We'll handle it. Then the audio recording. Her father's voice echoed in the courtroom. We signed for you. You didn't need to be involved. Silence. Grace stood. I never saw the deed. I never gave permission. I didn't sign anything. She handed the judge the amendment from Arizona. This names me as the legal heir to the family home and a second property in Aspen. The judge looked at the page, then at her father's lawyer. Did your clients disclose this? No, Your Honor. The judge's tone sharpened. Forging a signature is not a clerical error. It's fraud. The judge tapped his gavel once. I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Grace Evans. She is the rightful heir to both properties, effective immediately. The defendants must vacate within 30 days. Her mother gasped. Her father slumped. Amanda looked like the wind had been knocked from her lungs. Grace didn't smile. She walked over to their table, reached into her tote and pulled out the gold ribbon, the one Amanda had unwrapped like a queen. She set it down gently. Said nothing. Then walked out. 2 months later, Grace woke to the soft hush of wind through pine trees. Morning light poured into the Aspen cabin. She walked barefoot across wooden floors she now polished by hand. Her sketches lined the hallway, simple, framed, hers. In the kitchen, the bread basket from her neighbors still sat on the counter. Welcome home, Grace, the card read. She opened a drawer in the hallway looking for batteries and instead found something unexpected. An envelope with her name in her grandfather's handwriting. She opened it slowly. Grace, I saw everything. I couldn't stop them. But I made sure you'd own the door, not just the key. Grace didn't cry right away. The tears came quiet like dew on leaves. Not grief, just release. By mid-morning she drove past the house where she grew up. It looked the same. A frayed gold ribbon still hung near the mailbox. They hadn't taken it down. She didn't stop. Back home in Aspen, she opened a plain white box. Inside, a simple house key, unpolished, honest. She labeled it with masking tape. Not gifted. Earned. She placed it where sunlight would hit it every afternoon. Just then her phone buzzed. A message from Miss Hartman. Offer received. The DC Gallery wants your full art series. Grace smiled. Not because she won, but because she no longer needed permission. This time her name was carved into the story by her own hand. Remember to hit the like button, comment and subscribe to this channel for more of this.